my greetings. Well met. Greetings, traveler. Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello and welcome to episode 288 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, April 22nd in the evening. From Gadsden, New York, it's me, Ridiculousette. From Karazhan, California, we have Botticus.
Yo.
And from Undercity, Pennsylvania, it's Edelweiss.
Hello.
Hello. And listeners, we have you live from Twitch chat. Quite a few of you in here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got you out there listening on the patron feed. Thank you for tuning in early, and we've got you out there, listeners, on the podcast feed. Thank you so much for supporting our show. If you'd like to find out how you can support us financially, receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/coinconcede. Now support us by leaving an iTunes review. Totally free, really helps other people find the show. New patrons this week: Matt R, Lopper HS, and Buse. Thank you so much for the support. All right, what's up, everybody? So Edelweiss. Oh, it's going all right. Edelweiss, for your video listeners, they're seeing a picture of the Greek goddess of the hunt instead of you. You doing all right?
Yeah, got a bit of a headache. I'm not sure if it's lack of sleep. I feel like I was staying pretty hydrated, but sometimes that's a factor. It can be hard to tell if it's because I haven't eaten enough, because oftentimes once I start feeling under the weather, I don't really eat much. So just kind of riding it out, took a couple of Advil. Hopefully I feel better in the morning.
Sounds like you're not all that great at proactively taking care of yourself, which I relate to pretty significantly.
It's fine.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to take the moral high ground here. I am also awful at this. I just drank water because you reminded me that I need to do that today. Well, I hope you feel better. Have you been playing much Hearthstone lately?
I have. I probably very, very different Hearthstone than you, because I've been playing weird decks of my own creation or weird decks of other people's creation. My last stream last night was all just weird hunter stuff, because I'm trying to make Dire Frenzy work and I can't make it work. We really need Vicious Scalehide, and yeah, not having some kind of sustain is definitely a problem for those kinds of decks.
Yeah. Vicious Scalehide is, I'm glad that's not in standard, actually, because I don't want that to get hand buffed. That'd be really good if it got hand buffed.
But I do. I very much do. Or just make a hunter-specific one. It'll be fine.
I don't know. Hunter also seems to be doing kind of okay right now. Kind of okay.
For different reasons, though. Scalehide would serve a significantly different purpose than what current Hunter is trying to do to people.
Well, current Hunter, they're, apparently OTK decks are doing all right now. Hattrick was top 100 with one. Rami brought one to Specialist, where you just Leerox people. I guess that's a thing?
Yep.
It would make that deck worse, though, because it's a beast, and sometimes you would have it in your hand when you go to combo. And then they might not die, whereas right now they just die. And yeah, that deck felt good. I played that deck a little bit before nerf. It felt very strong.
I will say it is definitely a high point when you get to Dire Frenzy a Zixor Prime and just do that all day to someone. The third one generally gets there.
How often does that come up?
Not very.
How frequently have you done it? Did you do that one time?
Maybe twice.
Maybe twice? Okay. Well, that sounds fun. Botticus, how about you? What you been playing?
So, I had a daily quest that had 2 classes, and then it had Paladin. And so, I picked a Paladin deck that had a high win rate, and won 3 games, and then I was like, that felt really good. I'm gonna play it some more. And then I didn't stop winning games until I hit Legend. It was 8 games in a row or something. None of the games were particularly close. Deck feels pretty busted. And yeah, I'm like winning at 1700 legend or something. Not super impressive, but it was just kind of like I stopped playing decks that weren't paladin and I started winning a lot. And so deck feels pretty good.
That paladin class
I
seems
have,
strong.
yeah, I have a link to the list I used. It's a very mid-rangey paladin deck that has 5 post in it. And by 5 post I mean the
Ogre.
the ogre.
Ogremancer, yes.
Yeah,
I
Ogremancer.
Yeah.
So Ogremancer is actually feels crazy good because I played against a decent amount of paladin mirrors, and if you just stick an Ogremancer when you're ahead on board, there's actually so many spells in paladin they just never come back from it. And I won a lot of games like that. And then also I got to play Hammer of the Naru finally, and it feels like it's in a really good spot, especially because when you hit for the third time, essentially pyroblasting them in the face over 3 turns, then that usually gets followed up with another pyroblast in the form of Alexstrasza to their face, which also ends the game. So it's just like the secret version has all this stuff packed into the early game that it's really hard for your opponents to play around, and lets you kind of stick your Ogremancer in the middle parts of the game, which they also have a lot of trouble dealing with. And then you follow it up with Hammer the Naru, which just starts going face because they've been trying to deal with your board all game. And then, you can. Most of the games I didn't end up even needing the Alex, but had their draw been a little bit better, they still would have just died to the Alex. So it's like, I don't know, deck just felt really good the whole time I was playing it, and I probably drew pretty well because I do feel like I had sword in the majority of my games by turn 2. But I mean, yeah, game probably would have been harder if I didn't get to play 6 cards in the first 3 turns with the sword. So
You don't say.
yeah. It's just like, so I know there's been a decent amount of talk about like the secretless version, and it'd be kind of interesting to try, but man, just playing a lot of secrets for free and making your opponent try to play around them in the first 4 turns before you start playing your really powerful mid game is feels really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, in the last 3 and last 7 days in HSR, Secret Paladin and Aggro Paladin are within like 0.5% of each other, and they're the 2 best decks in the format. I don't think it matters too much. This feels like Mage Nangoro or Shaman in Karazhan, where you have more good Paladin cards than you can fit in a deck. So whatever configuration you choose is probably a good call, not to mention that you're including a lot of the neutrals that are kind of defining the format right now. You're playing Crab Rider, playing Mankrik, playing Kazakis, Ogremancer, Talon.
Why is it a 3/10, by the way? Why does it have 10 health? I don't remember if I brought this up last week. 10 health is so much health.
It's a lot.
It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter like what turn it comes out on. 10 is just so much health. Oh, and also, did you know that it's not Argent Squire.
Argent Protector.
Argent Protector?
It's actually
a 3/2
good
now?
They buffed it.
Yep.
I mean, it never mattered that it was a 3/2, but it's still better. It's just like now it's
it
just a
kinda
3/2.
Did you ever attack them or a minion?
I mean, none of my games were close hat. Remember?
Because of the Bloodfen Raptor, you had the pressure.
But did we ever play Argent Protector as a 2/2? No. So
I mean, it essentially it could have been a 2/2 in any of the games that I played in. It still would have been the same thing. All it did every time was just give me a value trade with a minion or prevent my minion from getting AoE'd down. Like it was just it was just a 2-mana divine shield that had a body behind that sometimes got to attack things, but oftentimes just, I think there was probably one game that would have been close if my opponent had value traded my minion, but instead I got to buff my minion and then divine shielded and value trade their minion, and then they ended up losing. But I probably still end up winning that that game if I remember it correctly. It was just like, I don't know. Deck felt really good. I'm pretty stoked that the ending Legend Climb was so easy. But yeah, I mean, haven't played a ton honestly outside of that. Deck felt good. I played a few other decks, but unfortunately, also the new PoE season started, and I said I wasn't going to play that game anymore, and I lied because I'm
And
playing it a
you
bit
also
now.
lied when you said the new PoE season started, because it kind of didn't for a while there.
Yeah, for like 8 hours. Well, that was the best part, is since I wasn't planning on playing this season, I just like got home from work, because normally if I was really going to commit to it, I would have taken the day off work. So I didn't have to take the day off work. I basically didn't play at all the first day because all my friends were complaining that the game wasn't playable, and then I just got to start playing the next day, and it's somewhat enjoyable, but it's definitely not where it was before all the changes. So less to look forward to, but I mean, they still make a good game. You can't deny how good the game is. It's just not the game that I would envision would be the perfect game for me. So that's fine. Still fun.
Design decisions that differ from your interests. That happens.
Yeah, but I mean, it's their game. It's not my. I didn't make the game, so
Yeah.
they can do whatever they want with it.
Yep, makes sense. Well, I'm glad he got Legend, and I'm not surprised that Paladin was good. That's going to be a recurring theme today as we talk about the meta right now. My meta the past week has been computer frustrations. I've been annoyed. And if anyone wants to talk about CPU voltages, we can, but I will be irrationally upset, and that's the end of the sentence. And, of course, when I tried to go live before the stream started, then there was a different issue, but I think I knew what happened. And I think I know what's been happening all week. But the thing is, you never really know, right? Because what I'm waiting for is the absence of a crash. And that means that it could always be right around the corner, and you never know. And sometimes it just doesn't show up. And sometimes right when you click go live on your podcast on Thursday night after 4 days of the computer being stable, it just crashes like that. And then you're anxious for the rest of the show. And by you, I mean me. I'm anxious for this show. But it'll be okay. I hope. But if the stream crashes, stay here. And if you're listening, download. It was fine. I hope. So yeah. But also it's been a week. I am now a permanent host in the Angry Chicken, which is pretty cool, pretty interesting. It's
Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, you all know the Angry Chicken. It's one of the longest running Hearthstone podcasts out there, and I am very excited to be over there, and I'm still in the Vicious Syndicate podcast. I did get a question on Twitter that I wanted to say right here. What does this mean for Concede? It means nothing will change here. Concede is home. This is the podcast that got me started podcasting, so you will not be able to get rid of me, and it will not get any less of my attention. CC is home, so don't worry about that. But really excited to be over there too. And as far as ladder, I have lost more than I've won this week by a large margin. I entered Legend last week-ish with Face Hunter. And then I tried other things, and I found myself touching 2,000 or so on NA, it's been months since I've been below 4 digits. However, I have turned it around a little bit. At first with Token Druid, turned it around a bit. Definitely not with Rush Warrior. My brain cannot process that deck. And then today, Ranlit posted a couple days ago a Priest list.
Oh no.
With double Devouring Plague, which is the 3-mana spell that shoots 4 Lifesteal Missiles, and double Flesh Giant. And my first 2 games were against Demon Hunters, which I understand is atypical because Demon Hunter's not great right now. In both games, I got a Flesh Giant down on turn 5, and in one of them, I cast the Apotheosis on it on turn 6. My opponent elected to not continue with that game. There's just not a lot of silence going around right now. And if you're able to Plague into Giant, you just kind of win the game. The second game I won, I got 2 Flesh Giants down, and then my opponent was able to clear them with Philosophy and made 3 Bladed Ladies, and then I cast 2 Raised Deads, and before I played any minions, they conceded. So, I did
Okay,
also...
that is a priest I can maybe get behind.
Yeah. I also did defeat a Cthulhu control warrior by just playing for tempo. The game went for a while. I sent the replay to Steve. I'm sure he's watched it and enjoyed it. The only issue is the warlock situation, is that if people are playing Ticketus and Jiraxis, you just can't really play priest, but today I didn't run into any, so I didn't switch off the deck. The link and code is in the show notes. I recommend it. Control priest is good right now, and it is very much a control deck, but you get to be proactive, and you get to play Apotheosis and whatever. I've been enjoying it, and Xyrella is quite the card. Oh, Xyrella, quite the card. I enjoy that one. It's fun. So yeah, I don't know. I find this meta really, really difficult. And it's the first meta we've had since Ungoro, where we didn't have an infinite resource generation tool, right? Because in Knights of the Frozen Throne, they printed Rexar. And we had Jade Idol already in Mean Streets, but that deck was really, really, really bad. So it wasn't until Knights of the Frozen Throne that it became good. And then after that, the next year, they printed Dr. Boom and Hagatha. And also we had Gen and Baku, which were button decks. And then after that, we had the Galacrons. So we've just kind of had infinite resource generation for 4 years in Standard. And we finally don't have it anymore, right? Isn't that kind of crazy? You think about it?
I mean,
Yeah.
technically we have Jiraxis.
We do.
That's the closest. That will be the closest thing, I think, right?
And he does qualify, right? Like, and that's part of the reason why Jirax is so punishing against control. He is definitely
Right.
the one that qualifies as infinite value. It's not quite as pervasive. And even other decks, like if you had Whirl Kick Rogue, didn't have infinite value, but it didn't matter where the limit was because you never hit it in the game. There wasn't a point where Whirl Kick Rogue ran out of stuff. You couldn't attrition that deck.
I mean, there's still definitely decks that feel like they don't run out of stuff, but
Yeah.
definitely nothing on the level of like a Rexar or Galacron Priest
Or Jade
I
Idol.
mean,
or
Priest-
Galacron Rogue.
priest still kind of doesn't run out of stuff. At least when
Well, right.
Sethic is involved.
Yeah, but Sethic, like, it's your generator, you have to put it on play, and you can get back a few with Raise Dead, but you're just generating some stuff, and it's not quite the same as infinite minions whenever you press your button. It's definitely not quite the same.
That is true. And sometimes you whiff on the spells that target things, and then you actually run dry.
And Priest still generates a bunch of crap, like, it still absolutely does that, and Mage can still feel kind of scammy, but it's definitely a different meta, so there's a lot more resource management. There's a lot more positioning matters a lot in this meta, and I'm really bad at it. Really bad at it.
Well, we've gone so long without having to do it. All of us, we went so many years of having to constantly think about it and always know all of the cards in the format and how to play around them correctly. And then they just got rid of all of the cards for at least a couple of years. Of just we're not going to have any of these positioning matters cards, and then all of a sudden they printed Combustion for Mage, and it didn't see play for a long time, so we're like, oh, we still don't have to worry about it, that's good. And then this expansion came out, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of stuff that you really have to pay attention, so that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they also had the closest thing we had was the axe for warrior, right? The spellburst axe
and guardian animals into Lake Thresher.
Yeah, but the problem with those is it almost never mattered the way you positioned, because it just killed everything regardless. You just had to like maybe think about where a taunt was placed most of the time.
Like if you had a far right taunt and two little guys in the middle or something.
The cleave positioning was always okay. Depending on the size of your board, it's like, do you want to position so that the thing doing the cleaving takes the most damage? Or do you want to position so that your biggest threats are on the outside so that at least one of them survives?
Yeah. It was at least a little bit clearer than now, and also only really mattered against Druid, and it doesn't matter against everything right now. It's really just like, it's mostly Mage and by extension Rogue. But there have been... I feel like there's another positioning card, but I'm forgetting it. No, I can't remember. Probably doesn't matter.
I feel like you're right, and also I can't think of what it is.
Someone in chat will correct us. But yeah, so and I haven't found any decks that I've super clicked with, but I like the games a lot. And I know we mentioned this last week, but the decks, there are a lot of neutrals that are seeing a lot of play in multiple classes and decks. There are a lot of familiar archetypes, but the gameplay I still really enjoy and find fascinating. There are a lot of good back and forth, a lot of player agency, a lot of resource management. So I'm just, I do wish that I was a little bit more excited about the decks, but I'm enjoying the games when they're being played out, even though I will, scroll Ahiron's Twitter and Donkey's page just to look for the new cool hotness, and haven't found anything quite yet. Except for the various OTK hunters going around. Those are spicy meatballs. Those are pretty exciting.
Yeah, Rami came out with one.
Yeah, Rami has one, and Hatrick has one as well.
So just so I understand correctly, because I heard you talking about this earlier, it's not like I really care too much about pre-stuff, but if you've lost 4 health and you play Devouring Plague, and they
It works
have
the way
4
you want it to.
minions,
Yeah.
then you can just play a turn 4 Flesh Giant?
That's correct, yes. It works the way you want it to. Not even 4
Seems
minions,
pretty
4
powerful.
health total, and you're at
Yeah.
26.
I thought that's what I said, but...
You said 4 minions,
You also-
which could also work.
No, I said 4 health, right? 4 health worth of minions?
Something like that. Doesn't matter. Yes, it works the way you want it to.
Okay.
If you were at 26 and it can hit 4 times, then yes.
It's pretty sweet.
I think so. It's enjoyable. So I got it down. I didn't get it down in turn 4, just because my health wasn't low enough. But I managed to get it down in
Right.
turn 5 a few times, and that was good enough.
Also, just dealing 4 damage in this format is super important, because all of Paladin's minions have 4 health, and it seems like it's generally fairly difficult to do. Just like Crab Rider matters a lot. Galloping Steed is a 3/4. The 3-drop that draws a minion, if you have a secret, is a
Mancrick.
3/4. Mancrick's a 3/4.
Goody
Just
2
everything
shields,
has
pops divine shields.
4 toughness, and it feels very difficult to do 4. Also, Octobot just always gets to go off. Or it feels like it almost always gets to go off.
Yeah. Well, usually Octobot I try and trigger on purpose when they play it, just because I want it to hit the least number of cards, because you can never really stop that from happening.
Right. I mean, it's still, and it's also still good when that happens. Even if you discount 3 or 4 cards, it's still not a bad trade.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think that we're still figuring out a lot about this meta. The first Vicious Syndicate report of the post-patch meta came out today, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in there. But we have a little bit of news here. It's a pretty light news week, but a light news week, but some heavy stuff. So we can jump in here and get started there.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so as Hat said, we have some pretty heavy topics this week. It kind of, some rumblings started last week when they announced all the players invited to the Invitational, and there began a lot of discussion about representation, and they ended up coming out with a statement that I believe Hat will read for us. And then also we have some statements from Regis, Kilbin, and Kriparian.
Yep. I don't think Crip made an active statement. I think he just said better to let our actions speak.
I know
louder
he
than
made a
words.
tweet. He made a tweet about it. So
Yeah. But yeah, so Crip and Regis gave up their invites, and instead Aveline and Luna got invited. So we're glad to see them on the big stage. And Play Hearthstone put out a statement here over 4 tweets. I'm going to read it word for word. We have 2 new participants for the Crossroads Invitational. Welcome Luna Love and Aveline to the roster, and a huge thanks to Crip and Regis Kilbin for graciously offering their slots. While we're doing this, representation and inclusion matter. We're committing ourselves to being better. It's vital that our events represent the reality of the Hearthstone community, made up of numerous talented and deserving women who dedicate themselves to the game every day. In order to commit ourselves to doing better in the future, every community event's invitees will have a greater representation of women moving forward. This is only one piece of our future plans around diversity and inclusion. To the women of the Hearthstone community, thank you, and know that we will live up to this through our actions. And over the course of the weekend, really, in the past week, there's been a lot of commentary and discussion about the issues around representation and sexism in the Hearthstone scene. A lot of these stories haven't been pretty, and I'm glad that Regis and Crypt kind of made a difference by their actions. Regis also wrote an excellent statement. It is far too long for me to read here. I strongly recommend going to read it. Also, I strongly recommend subscribe to his YouTube and like his stuff. He is a good person. I'm a fan. And Edelweiss, you are the woman here, so I'm gonna toss to you. Do you have anything in particular you want to share here or reflect on?
Yeah, so I was, we're kind of the last show to come out post all of this stuff, and I was kind of thinking about all this all week, and I feel like we're kind of walking that line where I don't want to gloss over this, but at the same time, I feel like all the most important things have already been said, and said well. We had Slissa released a YouTube video on this. I think Nicolina put out a YouTube video on this.
Nicolina had a 4-hour stream too.
Yeah,
there was a lot.
I watched that, and I totally agree with like 95% of it, because we all have different takes. I think my biggest differentiator from Nicolina was that I do think that women-only events are productive and useful. I think that the end goal should be that we don't need them, that they shouldn't exist. But much like invitationals, they are a good way of showing like representation of demonstrating, particularly to younger folks, young women, that hey, we have women in esports, we have women competing, and this is something that you can strive for. I worked on the Valorant Game Changers. I was just moderating Twitch chat and getting clips, and that was the event we were doing was all female Valorant teams, and we had a staff that was almost all female, and it was just like super empowering to be working with a bunch of other women on this sweet event and watching these very talented women competing. Some of them are only like 16 years old, and they're really good at Valorant. And wow, we had to be on top of that Twitch chat because there was some really, of course, toxic stuff in there. People coming in and being like, why isn't, what is this women's league? There was a lot of confusion, like why the men's wasn't playing right then, why this event was happening. And overall, it was better than I expected, but it was still rough. And I am in kind of an odd position where I did not grow up experiencing any of that because I grew up male. And then I came out as trans in college, transitioned in college. And by the time I got into the Hearthstone community, it just was like I was fully transitioned, so I didn't get stigmatized as trans. And I've always been I feel like I'm a veiled undead wearing my mask of the shapeshifter. I just kind of blend into spaces, and I haven't gotten any trouble. I've been small enough, I think honestly just small enough that, I haven't gotten harassed. But the more success you have as a woman in these spaces, the more you're going to encounter, unfortunately, various kinds of harassment. And I was streaming today, and someone I didn't know, I think they might have just dropped in, like they come in the chat and the first thing that they say is, hey cutie. And like, I don't, I don't want to assume ill will. I like just saying, like, they didn't really say much after that. They just asked, how I was doing, and I said how I was doing, and I asked how they were doing, and like, they didn't say anything else in chat. Maybe they tipped out because I didn't react in the way they were hoping. I don't know. I don't like to assume ill will, but it's kind of a thing where it, like,
That's
had I
not why you're
been
streaming a video game. You are
Right.
not there for
Had I been
commentary on your
streaming-
appearance.
had I been streaming as my 15-year-old self, that wouldn't have happened, right? Because I would have been presenting male, and you don't do that to male streamers.
Yeah, I've never been called a
and
cutie.
the solution is not that, oh, we should go do these things to male streamers. The solution is, like, maybe we just don't do that generally. There's a lot of great camps and stuff where one of the rules they have is no body talk. And I've been thinking, like, some people that really, like, rubs them the wrong way. They're like, oh, well, but, like, if I want to compliment you on this thing, why can't I do that? Why does it have to be, like, very strict no body talk? And it's like, well, because some people don't feel great about their image, and so you're complimenting one person, you're not complimenting another person, and people are self-conscious about various things. Maybe
Like, in person,
you compliment
I
someone
kind of
one
get
day,
it.
you don't another day, and they're like, oh, do I look bad today? I don't know.
In person, like at a camp or whatever, I imagine that you're interacting with people with a parasocial relationship, like a streamer. No one is there to show off the look unless it's really clear that that's what they're doing. If someone is there to stream a video game wearing a turtleneck or whatever, they're not there to be judged in their appearance.
And to be clear, I was wearing, like, a ski sweatshirt, right? Like, I don't wear makeup. I don't, like, put on appearances. I have been thinking about maybe doing a bit more of that, but then I'm always like, oh, it's such a pain, though.
Yeah. And Nicolina was talking about this, how she had to start caring about that to grow her stream. And that's not something I have not had to worry about my presentation to grow my stream. It's, especially during furlough when I haven't had a haircut in a year. Thanks to my wife for taking the edges off. I don't know. There's a lot, like you said, Elias, there's a lot of conversation out there. It's been over there this week, and there are some creators that put a lot of work into a lot of really significant statements that we can point you to. Slissa made a really, really great YouTube video. That's probably the first place I'd start. And to plug my other podcast, The Angry Chicken, my co-host Jocelyn Carney, my co-host Joss Plays, she has an unfortunate amount of personal anecdotes that are really relevant and are totally heartbreaking. And we go pretty deep into this topic on that show. And, we definitely care about it here, but it's been a week of discussion. We covered it also on last week's show. We just want to avoid belaboring the point, and we strongly recommend check out Slissa's video, check out Gia's tweet thread about this. It was really, really great. And check out this week's episode of The Angry Chicken. And, yeah, be nice to women. I don't know. Be nice to people. Just yeah.
Yeah. And, it all comes back to, I don't actually want to talk about this. I want to talk about the game.
Yeah.
But, we wanted to make sure that we put our piece out there as well, and then we can direct you to those resources that have already said so much. I listened to that episode of The Angry Chicken, and I was almost in tears right there with Joss. It's really heartbreaking, some of the stuff she's been through. So
yeah. Yep. So we're more than happy to discuss more of this in the Discord. There's there's been an ongoing chat about this. But also we wanna talk about Hearthstone. There's not as much news this week, but we want to get to the gameplay stuff. We do have one more news item here, Botticus. You want to take it?
Yep, same news item we have every week.
Try and take over the world
of Warcraft, the card game called Hearthstone. Directed by Iksar, who did an AMA this week, as he does every week. And two of kind of the big topics that we gleaned this week. One was about the watchtowers, and the question was about, was the watchtower nerf more based on the win rate or the feel of the card? And the response is that it was mostly based on the feel of how it was to play against them. We knew that the nerfs would be pretty hard on these cards, but they also don't want them to show up as regularly as a card like Tar Creeper or Sledge Belcher. They're happy if they are fringe cards that make a certain deck archetype work, but they don't want to just be in decks because they have a general power level that's high enough that you just auto include them in a lot of lists. So I think they're in a probably not in a great spot now because I haven't really seen one since the nerf, but I'm also okay with that because don't need to see them all the time.
Yeah, it's I think you could still, there are still metas where you would consider playing 3 or even 4 post. I don't think there are all that many where you play 2 post now, just because it's so vulnerable to removal. But I'm glad that it's a choice, and I'm glad the choices usually don't do it because they were a pain in the butt to play against, especially when they were so efficient that your best course of action was to ignore them and hope you won anyway.
Yep. And the other big topic was he kind of answered this one a little bit before, but we have a little more depth on it. Can we expect to see any buffs in future balance changes? And basically, they're going to be talking about it this upcoming week. They wanted to give these nerfs some time to breathe so they can see kind of the results of what they did. They don't have a date yet when they would do any buffs or nerfs, but if Uther is hanging around a 54% plus win rate with only a few bad matchups, we'll probably tag it again, which I have a feeling is in Uther's future, but still pretty early to tell.
There's also that last sentence there. It's pretty important.
Yeah. If it ends up being the best deck, it's fine. They just don't want to it's okay if Paladin is the best deck. They just don't want it to be so much more the best deck that you don't have another choice, or you don't feel like you have another choice other than to play that deck if your goal is winning.
I could see a little nudge, and Shaman could use a buff. I think that would be the class that stands out to me. I also would like to see a Zoo deck once ever in my entire life, but remains to be seen if Zoo will compete without Voidwalker. I don't even know what buff they would do. I don't know.
Just anything that makes seeing Warlock as a priest not an auto concede.
Yes. Because right now, if you're a priest and you queue into a warlock, then you just know you're going to get ticked into J-Rax, and you can't do that. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are choices outside of Paladin right now, but the stats are still pretty crazy, so there are nudges that could come. When do we think this is going to be? If they're talking about it this week, because this was from last Friday, so they're talking about it this week. And that means, well, they're not going to nerf... Alec already said they're not going to make any adjustments before the Masters Tour, which is next Friday.
So the week after that.
Which is the first week of May.
Yep.
5 weeks after the set launch.
Still seems pretty soon. It depends on...
That's
probably...
What, a week and a half? It's in a week and a half.
Still pretty... we just got nerfs last week.
Yeah?
I don't know. I mean... It depends on how oppressive Paladin actually is.
Maybe they announce that they're working on them then. They come out the following week. And then the thing is, we're going to have mini set a couple weeks after that.
That's
so
what, probably last week of May. And then in between that, they do have to do the Battlegrounds patch. Because they do...
I'm waiting for that.
Yeah.
Razor Boars?
Quill Boars.
Right?
Yes.
Quill Boars? Same thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
I wonder what their thing is going to be.
So they do 4 major patches per expansion. 0.0, which is release, 0.2, which is a month after, which is the Bee Gees patch, 0.4, which is the mini set, and 0.6, which is the last patch before rotation, which is... It's been a new game mode for like the past 3 expansions. At some point that'll stop happening. Maybe it could be Mercenaries. We've seen so little of Mercenaries that my doubts are increasing. Because if you're going to release a giant new game mode like that, I think you'd want to hype it up now. Maybe it's too far away. I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, if it's not first week of May, if it's second week of May, then that'd be a 3-week meta until the mini set. I don't know. It's gonna feel pretty rapid either way, I think. And BG's is pretty stale right now. I would really like that new tribe, what do they call it? Minion type. Really like the new minion type.
Yeah, I just want to shake up. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like we're to the point in this meta where I still haven't figured it out, and I don't have time to figure it out before it changes again to actually get good. So I'm just kind of stuck in this zone where it just feels like don't understand how things are working. I guess it's like I don't understand how to scale properly, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is a problem because you lose a lot and people are really good at it, and so you just run into people with kind of crazy boards that'll one-shot you in the mid game, I guess you would call it.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that soon. And the timeline does line up for right after the Master Store, but we don't know if it's the immediate week after or the week after that. I'm curious. And as Jay Correct points out in chat, and I have heard the sentiment as well, I have heard that at high MMR, the metas actually shift a little bit, but also Baron's Blacksmith, the new 3-star unit that if it frenzies, it +2/+2s your entire board, is pretty insane mid-game. And it's just a ton of damage if it hits, with also a good bit of variance to whether it goes off or not. And that it maybe isn't the best fit for the mode. So.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. I haven't seen it, but I'm also not super high MMR, so that would make sense. It's probably one of those cards that heavily incentivizes going first. It's probably, I'm guessing it's similar to the feel way back when you would have a spawn versus not having a spawn of N'Zoth, and having the spawn always felt insane compared to not having a spawn. So it's probably a similar feel at 3-star, and then you just have to figure out when to get rid of it, because it falls off pretty bad when people start getting 5 and 6-star units. Basically, as soon as it starts attacking and not frenzying, it's pretty bad.
I'm looking forward to new stuff in BGs. I haven't played any. I'm just chilling. Every so often I try and go in, I'm like, I don't understand this meta, and I missed Darkmoon prizes, and I'm bad at this, so I'm going to wait until I can be bad, but it's new and exciting. Alright, let's go to tournaments.
For me.
What? Yeah, let's go to tournaments, because we actually have some stuff to talk about. Hi, Steve.
It's the grand tournament!
Hey, some stuff happened tournament-wise this week. First of all, GM Week 2 was an interesting week, and I've really enjoyed watching it a lot more than I have in previous seasons. The production quality is definitely better, and seeing the post-patch meta was a lot more interesting than seeing the pre-patch meta. This upcoming week, the one that's going on right now, is Specialist. I'm less likely to tune into this one, but APAC didn't bring any priests, so maybe I'll watch the APAC games. We'll see what happens. Also, Language Hacker brought a Control Warlock that sideboards into Robes of Protection and Altar of Fire to beat Il'gynoth decks. Language Hacker, much respect to you. Yeah. And what Rami brought in OTK Hunter. I want to see what Luna brought. I actually don't know. I'm just checking the decks live on the air. I don't care. Whatever. Oh, the decks aren't even public. Bummer. So there were a couple outliers on sample size, but generally speaking, it was a good week for Miracle Rogue, Spell Mage, Face Hunter, and OTK Demon Hunter. It was a bad week for Poison Rogue and Control Warlock. Get used to hearing that about both those decks. Give Please won in Asia, Warma won on EU, and Tincho won on the America server, the newest Grandmaster that was brought in by Just Saying's retirement. Took home a win. Also, Warma had a really sweet Hero Power Mage that was basically Spell Mage, but with, like, a few minions. So you can Mordresh and Reckless Apprentice and also just play Jan Despairov because of Jan Despairov. Yeah. Remember how they nerfed that card? Me neither. Who cares? Just play it. It's busted. So yeah, some really
I
interesting.
mean, it's busted later now. That's good. I like
Yes.
the fact that it's now busted later.
I'm glad they nerfed it. I'm glad it's still playable, and I can't believe it was 5 for as long as it was. So, what else? The Invitational. The Invitational has some interesting rules. There was a frenzy mechanic where after a player lost once, they got double points for the rest of the event. So Firebat and Trump SC went undefeated and tied for 3rd and 4th because Kibler and Dexter both lost their first match, I think, and then just won out and actually had more points. But Blizzard, good Blizzard, they paid out first place money to both of them because they realized, hey, these rules are kind of dumb. Here's some more money. So I'm glad they did that. And there were some fun formats, including like a Nozdormu format. They had to have at least 10 Barons cards. It was enjoyable enough to watch. I mean, it was an invitational. Like if you like that sort of thing, then you like that sort of thing. But I'm glad that they accounted for the fact their rules were kind of silly by not denying Trump and Firebat extra money for going undefeated. It's good entertainment. Yeah. We had some qualifiers. Meta's pretty interesting. In qualifiers, it feels like a little bit more control heavy and about a week ahead of the ladder meta. A lot of Priest and Warrior, a lot of OTK Demon Hunter, weirdly enough. A little bit of Paladin, a little bit of Warlock, a Rogue here, a Hunter there, 1 Mage, 1 Token Druid, and 1 Aggro Shaman. The best decks were Rush Warrior, no Secret Aggro Paladin. The worst decks were Clown Druid and Poison Rogue. Get used to hearing that. Because Poison Rogue I'm really glad that deck is bad, because if it's ever good, it's going to be so toxic. I've played a little bit of that deck. All you do with that
toxic.
Deck...
That's poisons.
I
know you didn't mean that one, so it was actually funny. Whereas when you mean them, it's like significantly less enjoyable for me.
Well, I'm glad that you caught it, and it was, and I am amused. Yeah. Anyways, the version that Vicious Syndicate has now has double Cloak of Shadows, which is a good indicator of how non-interactive a deck wants to be. Every game I've played with that deck, I either get an early shank, and every single turn I play all my cards that say poison, I drag my face to their face, and then if I'm gonna die, I play a Cloak. And then I just do that till the game is over. And then when I don't draw a sword, I just lose. So I hope that deck stays bad forever, because it doesn't feel like Rogue. It doesn't even feel like Kingsbane. It feels not like Hearthstone. It's very strange. But it also sucks against 2 minions at the same time, so good. I'm glad. And then the Vicious Syndicate ladder report came out today. I mean, we talked about the ladder a little bit. Rush Warrior, Aggro Paladin, Secret Paladin on top. But there's a good bit of variety to the meta. There's a lot of development. You can't just look at the matchup table here. You'll definitely want to read the report. Priest could potentially be getting a lot better. I think it's going to be quite good. Face Hunter's still fine. Token Druid's still fine. Secret Rogue is getting better. Developments are really just starting here. And there are some cool lists in there, like the Flex Tape Elemental Shaman. Because in this meta, there's the meme I'm sure you both have seen, where any deck in Standard, you take a Wand Maker, Venomous Scorpid, Mancrick, and, what's the last one? Alexstrasza, I think?
Alexstrasza.
You just slap it on the side of the deck. The Flex Tape is what we call it. So, yeah, the Shaman deck, playing all those. Deck is alright.
Scorpid is surprisingly annoying.
Yeah.
Very good. I think especially if you're the warrior, like, you see a priest play Scorpid, they go like Wand Maker, Scorpid, and Raise Dead. You're just like, I can't rush into that. Like, you really have to have the weapon to clear the Scorpid, or else your rush minions are going to have a bad time.
It's
Yeah.
the most magic feeling of anything that I've ever experienced, just because 2-for-1s feel like they almost never matter in Hearthstone, but I feel like we're at a point in power level where it's like, oh man, if I trade my Rush minion for their Scorpid that just gave them a card, it feels so bad. It feels so much worse than it would in any other format, I think.
Yeah, and Scorpid also, like, it's surprisingly relevant to pair with Hysteria. Like, sometimes you just make things die. And Hysteria also doesn't really need much help being better, but it is better.
I mean, it lets you clear boards where, like, they're playing around Hysteria, right? And so you just turn it into an Assassinate.
Yeah. Basically. Or like an unwilling sacrifice of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a card, but also what happens, for those unfamiliar.
It's also probably the only way to beat an Ogremancer is to have that down a turn before it comes down, because otherwise you just can never get through 7 health.
As which deck?
Any deck. Any deck
I mean,
has...
Warrior doesn't play spells, and I found that Ogre's trigger being a whenever and not an after, I actually kind of use that a lot, where I'll make them have extra 2/2 so I can Hysteria the Ogre into them.
Yeah,
like, that
I've had
comes up
that
a lot.
happen too.
And you can condemn for 2 a lot of the time, and like the 2/2 appears and then disappears, and you can Zyrella them or whatever. The decks that can't beat Ogre kind of disappeared, so I think there are ways to deal with it, but it is also just a really powerful effect. So yeah. And this meta, I don't think the decks are quite stable enough for us to really talk about, but there are some cards that we want to talk about playing around, both in when you play your cards and when you deal with their cards. Basically, we made a list of cards that we've made dumb mistakes against, and then we're going to talk about them for a while. So, let's go.
So Hat is being generous with his use of we. I was holding my head, trying to feel better.
Reksham in chat just said the card we were just talking about is Ogreplayed.
Oh no.
I was trying to ignore it.
Oh no.
No, we're drawing attention to it. That's what we're doing.
But why?
Because of your reaction just now.
Anyway, as I was saying, so Hat made this Decksplanations. Timing is everything. What you need to play around. And we've talked about how the board is very essential right now. One of the ways we are fighting for board early is Crab Rider. And a lot of times, as I'm sure Bot is familiar with, Crab Rider into Hand of Adal. Because that gets people.
Or conviction?
Or conviction, yeah.
Yeah.
Or getting it buffed with Avenge. There's a lot of things that make Crab Rider really scary in Paladin, but also really scary in other classes too.
So, like, I put Crab Rider down as a thing that we need to play around, because this is a thought process that goes through my head a lot of, on turn 1, if I'm Paladin with first day of school in the coin, I am way more likely to coin out both 1-drops if I'm worried about a Crab Rider on 2 and they can survive, so I can trade back and kill it before they can buff it. It's really important to be aware of, if they play a Crab Rider, how can I kill it? Because if you don't plan for it, then it feels... Crab Rider can feel kind of Edwin Van Cleefy if they buff it enough that you just can't really remove it, then it runs away with the game early. I don't love that. I expect the card to get a nerf to a 1/3 at some point. And you kind of have to be aware that any deck that could have Crab Rider, if you cannot deal with it if it gets buffed, you have to coin out your 1-drops or play your 1s and 2s and figure out what you're going to do.
It's weird. It's just like, it fights for board and then also is a win condition. It's just like a really solid card at the stats. Like, I don't know why it has Rush. The Rush... I don't... it either needs to not have Rush, or not have Wind Fury, or have less toughness.
3 health. 3 health fixes a lot of the problems. The card is kind of useless if it doesn't have Rush.
I mean, it fixes some of the problems. It's just like... It's a lot of text on the card
There've
for
been a few
the cost.
times where it has been relevant to like be able to hit a 3-power thing twice, and you won't be able to do that anymore. I think it's like the utility is just too good right now, and yeah, there's a number of classes where you run this out on 2, and you're really scared about it getting buffed. I think No Hands has Shield of Honor in his Rush Warrior because, really good on Wormhole Challenger, really good on Crab Rider.
And to be fair, Shield of Honor on Crab Rider in that deck is kind of magical Christmas land. It doesn't come up very much. When it does, it's really good. But, like, if you're the Rush Warrior and you say, okay, I just need to have this 1/3 Crab Rider survive, that's very optimistic, and then you play some Shields of Honor, that's fine. I don't know if that's,
Times
I don't
it's
know
buffed.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, if it's hand buffed, I mean, it's... If you shaved a health off the card, I think it would really feel pretty different. Because there are a lot of class cards that can buff it, but it's a neutral, so everybody has access to it. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets shaved a little bit. And I mean, this is the same kind of thing about Hand of Adal. You kind of have to be aware of Paladins on turn 1. You want to go out of your way to play stuff on your turn 1 to clear the minions so they can't hand on 2 and run away with the game. This is a lot less common since they stopped playing 1 mana 1/3 on 1. Like, with fewer Aldor attendants, it's not always a 3/5. A lot of times it's a 3/3. Yeah, you just kind of have to be aware of it against Paladin, and choosing not to do it can cause for really snowbally board states because nobody's playing Broom. Again, for some reason. There's so few Brooms in this meta. I don't know. I don't get it.
Unfortunately, it's often a 3/3 that drew a card on turn 1 as well.
Well, a 3/3 that drew the Hand of Adal.
Yeah, it's just like a Kobold Librarian that has slightly higher upfront cost and less actual cost because it doesn't cost life. But also Kobold was a 2/1 for the longest time for some reason.
Still is.
It was still 2/1. It never
Wait,
got nerfed.
I thought, oh no, it's somehow Sludge Slurper is the one that that got the nerf bat. And Kobold just stayed at 2/1 the whole time. Man, that's some weird stuff.
Yeah, and if you are able to clear off the minion on turn 1, Hand of Adal drops in value substantially, so it can be mitigated, but the meta has to be managed pretty significantly in how your decks are constructed, that you have to be really low to the ground no matter what you're doing. And this has kind of been a thing since Skullomance, but it's definitely still a factor here that with how the early game develops, there are a couple classes that'll really punish you if you don't have anything going on.
Did Kobold Librarian really go its entire time in Standard and not get nerfed the whole time?
It hasn't been nerfed.
I know I shouldn't
ever.
be stuck on this, but
it's
that's
reasonable
insane.
to say how did this happen. It also didn't get nerfed in Wild when it was enabling turn 3 Molten and Flesh Giants. It's still a 1 mana 2/1 that life taps you.
What a good card.
It is.
Indeed.
And then Edelweiss, you talked about this next one, about Trampling Rhino.
Ooh, Trampling Rhino. Wow. Yeah, I've been on both the enjoyable and unenjoyable side of this. So Trampling Rhino is often a 7/6 now because it tends to be drawn by a Wrangler on 4. Your 3 mana or 4 mana 3/4 that discover a beast from your deck, give all copies of it +2/+1, and you draw one of them. The only beasts in Face Hunter are Wolpertinger and Trampling Rhino. Pretty much any Hunter deck right now has a maximum of 3 beasts. So it's always going to be an option to pick Rhino, and then it's going to be a 7/6 coming down. And what that usually means is you need to think, okay, how do I push the most pressure while not keeping small minions on my board? Because you don't want something with 1 HP for Trampling Rhino to hit into, or you're going to take a lot of damage. I've had times where it ended up being a mistake to play an Ogreplayed because they got to play a spell, give me a 2/2, and then Trampling Rhino it.
Yeah. It's... And that's what Ogreplayed, I think you can actually interact with it in a way. That's the magic word, interaction. But yeah, Trampling Rhino, the way to interact with it is just manage your own board state. And a lot of this meta is about making sure you don't have crappy minions on the board at the wrong time. Because it's very easy to have the wrong minions in the wrong places and for bad things to happen. Actually, like, half the things we're talking about are about, like, don't have 1 health minions on the board at a certain amount of time. But yeah,
Well,
Rhino.
that's also the worst part about it is a lot of times it feels like it attacks and value trades something while doing a bunch of damage to your face, and now you have to decide if you're going to like face tank it to remove it. Like the removal spells aren't great, or you have to overcommit one of your minions just to kill it, and then they just bonk you on the head with another one the next turn with the minion you didn't use to trade with it. It's yeah, Trampling Rhino is a problem, or can be a problem if you don't play, or at least have some sort of strategy to figure out what you're going to do if it comes down.
When the Hunter deck is ahead, it tends to stay ahead. And if you look at Trampling Rhino's text box very carefully, like a magic eye, right? You look at Rush and then the text, and then you spread your eyes apart slowly, you'll see that it actually says charge. It's actually a charge minion if you have any minions in play. And also, you really want to be careful about if you were the Paladin. First of all, Schwal mentioned this in chat, Noble Sacrifice, not the play. Do not run the Noble Sacrifice out there. You take 6 if it's buffed to a 7/6. Same with Righteous Protector. You're like, hey, this Righteous Protector is great. Does not stop Rhino. You still take -1 off of the attack to the face. Now, if you're Righteous Protector with a Blessing of Authority on it, that's a good play. You want to do that one. Protector Blessing, that's a 9/9. You're fine. But yeah, just be aware of that. And also, we've mentioned this, I think, 3 weeks in a row. If you were a deck with Hysteria and they have a Trampling Rhino, don't do it. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. What's this next one? Alexstrasza. Bodicus, you were talking about Alexstrasza, which is like your second Pyroblast.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a Pyroblast that does slightly less damage, but also costs 1 less mana and gives you an 8/8. I mean, most of the times you don't need the 8/8 because they just die. But if you're a proactive deck, then it's really solid for doing that, because it oftentimes just kills your opponents. And also it pairs really well with the neutral minion that draws your most expensive card. So you kind of have 2 copies in your deck, because
Talon Bordering.
Yeah, Talon will draw your Alex, and then your opponent knows that they're on a ticking clock before they're about to die. But usually they spend... it's really, really difficult to balance dealing with the board while also keeping your health total at a respectable point where you don't just die to the Alex. But also they can just Alex you, and then there's an 8/8 to deal with, in addition to either you just took 8 or your biggest minion is just now dead. Which also, it doesn't deal with Mancrick's wife. That has 10 health somehow. Why? Why does it have 10 health?
His life cannot be bound. I don't know. 10 is a lot, isn't it? 10 is like
Nice
so
round
much.
number.
The life aspect cannot actually end Mancrick's life. That guy is committed. He's really into the justice thing.
I just don't know where they came up with that amount of health. I don't know where it's like they just put it in a random number generator. They're like, all right, we're going to do some number between 1 and 10, and then we'll pick that number and whatever it comes out, and it just happened to roll a 10. And now it's like, all right, well, you know, sometimes there's just a 3/10 on board starting on turn 4, and oh, by the way, it also dealt 3 to their face.
You know what? That factoid about Alexstrasza not being able to kill a Mancrick, I'm convinced. Move it to 8. Because, like, and so 8 is relevant for not just this reason.
4. It could be 4 and still be really good. What do you mean?
Move it to 8 because 3, 4, double the 4, it's an 8. It's twice. It's twice. I don't know. It's the second Mancrick double. I don't know. It's Geopass in chat is saying that 10 was Olgra's favorite number according to the lore. Sad face. That is a sad face. I would like that, but also she's gone. We can change it. She'll never have to know. I know that's kind of messed up, but like we can just turn it down.
I think maybe it's it's actually a downside because when you hysteria the man crick, it's usually a full board clear.
Except no, because it just also survives, and then it gets and then it gets the buff from the avenge, and then it's.
You're telling me you've never been like playing around hysteria, and then you're like, "Yay, I drew man crick," and then they play the hysteria, and man crick
I mean,
clears their whole board.
I haven't played that many games, but 10 has so much health that oftentimes it would clear my whole board and still be around with 4 health or something. It's 10 is so much. 10 is so much health.
It is a lot of health. No, it's.
But also, 8 is a lot of damage, and you can just point and click where that damage goes. And also, sometimes I'm sure it's relevant that it heals for 8. I guess maybe.
There have been times I played it because if I didn't play it, I would die, and I did play it and I didn't die, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you get to play the first Alex and you're behind, maybe it catches you up so that you don't die to the Alex.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a goofy thing I had today where I was like trying to set up the 2-turn as a rogue against warrior, and I'm like, great, all right, we're staying out of their Alex range. I'm going to deal 8 to them, and then step my Alex, and next turn I'll Alex them twice, and then they Alexed their own face for heal, and I was like, oh, right. I knew they had that because I was playing around the damage. They can also heal.
This is a very the big penflinger meta is not one that I'm ready for. It's a very large penflinger. Also, I'll point out, Craptasm in chat, Bauticus raises a very good point to you. You've graduated numbers by 1. Because you were very big on the number 9. But now you're big on the number 10.
I mean, it's right now, it's just like 8, 9, and 10, because Alex somehow does 8 damage wherever you want, which is a lot. And then, I mean, Skull is still 9, by the way. Probably the reason why Demon Hunter is still playable, because of that card alone.
There's
And
also a
then
card
we
in
have
that deck
10.
that does 8.
I am really worried when we get to 11. 11 is going to be really scary. I don't know what it's going to be, but better watch out. That's going to be a game ender right there. I'm telling you right now.
Snow Fury Giant. Watch out, ladies. That's the only 11 mana card I can think of. And you never paid 11 for it. Snow Fury Giant, for those unaware, is the for each crystal you've overloaded this game, it's reduced by 1. It's a shaman. 8/8.
Last seen in the pick 2 or pick 3?
Pick
Tavern
3.
Brawl?
Yes.
Pick 3, yeah.
Lightning Bloom, Ancestral Knowledge, and Snow Fury Giant.
Yep. Some good turn 1s there.
Yes. But also it's Tavern Brawl. But yeah, so you can't really play around Alex much other than if you're aware that your opponent is going into turn 9, and you could either trade or face tank or not trade. Don't go to 8 life or below, because you might die. That's all. And there are also cards that you have to reactively play around and be aware of starting in turn 1. This is one they've messed up every time. If you were against a mage or a rogue because Wand Thief, think about your combustion positioning with every minion you play, because it will blow you out. It will happen. And you usually want the big ones in the middle.
Yeah, for sure. I've had turns where I just sort of play things not thinking, and then I look at my board and I'm like, oh, combustion really gets me here, doesn't it?
It does. It has. Not the only mage card either. How many times have you all gotten blown up by devolving missiles? Because it's been a lot for me.
So many times.
I mean, I don't know about blown out, but that card is good, and it gets me. It's like, there wasn't a whole lot I could do here. It's just, they played the card, and hopefully I mean, the only times it's been a big blowout is when I've had an Ogremancer in play, and it spits out the 2/2, and then all 3 missiles hit the 2/2.
I mean, that's a pretty good outcome. I'm talking, I had a Braggart, a 6/7 Braggart and a 6/6 or a 6/5 Divine Shield. Maybe it was 6/6 actually, as Paladin. And yeah, they played Devolving Missiles. They turned my Braggart into a 1-drop. They turned my 6/6 Divine Shield into a 3/2 derailed coaster, and I lost that game.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's really a great way to play around this card other than just be aware of how you use your buffs. If you
It's just
Lady
wide boards.
wide
It's the best you
boards,
can do.
hold some buffs. If you play Lady Liadrin, maybe hold some Librams. You know, it's yeah. Don't go super tall on a single minion if you need that minion to survive. And if you're facing down lethal, then you might want to go wider than just a big taunt. Yeah, you can't always play around all these cards. Like Galloping Savior, you can kind of play around. You can be aware of it. If you play two,
Definitely. This is I actually think this is one of the big ones to play around. Maybe just because I've played against so many paladins and I was playing paladin, but
Yeah.
there's so
and
many
people just
times
like they
where
fire it off and have no plan for the 3/4, and just like you can see they were mousing over another attack and didn't even think about it.
Right. I mean, I definitely made a lot of plays where I was just like, well, I know they have a Galloping Steed. I probably can still win the game if I trigger it, but also there's just no reason to trigger it. So you just might as well use your hero power more liberally. And as long as you're ahead, then might as well just leave it in play as long as you're doing impactful things. The problem gets to be when you draw your first day of school in the mid game and you need to play it, and then you want to play some of those minions, it can get dicey. So sometimes you might think about maybe having a turn where you have to already play like a meaningful 5-drop, and then you can play your first day of school that turn so that you have more card availability for future turns to play it. Just trying to think of other ways, because a lot of times you would want to save a first day of school if you weren't going to play any of the 1-drops for like a pen flinger, but a lot of lists aren't playing that anymore, so you can kind of be more liberal. But definitely the paladin secrets, I think, are really important to get a sequencing down that you're gonna be okay with whatever the outcome is, because there are some really nasty combinations that can happen, like if they have Avenge Protector up with a Crab Rider in play, that's really dangerous for you. And then obviously Oh My Yogg, preparing for triggering that in a turn. I think those are the 3 big ones, honestly, that are hard to play around. And then just know that if you haven't triggered a secret in a while, it's probably a Galloping Steed. And if you can avoid it, or you have a plan what to do after you trigger it, it's important.
Yeah.
Important to be thinking about it.
Except for all
Steed
those
is the one
times,
that
there have been a lot of times where I've played around Steed and then attacked the minion and it was a Reckoning, because I never bothered to check for it.
Oh, yeah, you don't see that one much.
No.
I mean, that's also hard to... That one's one of the hard ones, I think, to play around a lot of the times in the Paladin deck specifically, but I guess there are times where you have a buffed minion and a 3/3, and you could use the Reckoning on your 3/3 first. But also Reckoning triggers if you trade with minions, right?
It does, yes.
So, yeah, Reckoning's going to be one of the more rare cases, but definitely think more about Reckoning if it's a generated secret. That's one... I think more often Reckoning's going to be generated than it is going to be in the main decks of a lot of Paladin decks, but it's good to definitely think about that, I think.
Although it honestly surprises me that it's not in more, as we've been seeing like the warriors and things showing up. I guess it's really just good against warrior at this point, not and perhaps occasionally like hunter with the rhinos.
Yeah,
But
you can kill a
probably,
Rhino,
like-
you can kill a Felma, but it's...
Probably,
Yep.
doesn't it
Yeah.
kill Samuro before its Frenzy Trigger goes off?
I don't
If
think
the
so.
Samuro did 3 damage.
I believe so I was actually talking about this today in a Discord. It depends if the Reckoning triggers off the frenzy damage or it triggers off the initial attack. I believe the Frenzy still goes off, but I don't know 100%. Don't 100% know that one. So I wasn't sure if it was batched like Penslinger and Pressure Plate or not. But I know that it's, if you apotheosis it and it triggers on the first attack, I know that they don't gain the life. But I think the Frenzy still works. But that's still relevant too.
Huh.
It's a very strange interaction.
Oh, because he would be dead before. Oh, that is bizarre. That is super unintuitive.
It could also just be a bug and not be working the way it's supposed to. Like,
Yeah.
and then they just change it next patch. I don't know. I don't know exactly how it works, nor I don't know how it should work. But this is what I was talking about earlier today. Anyways.
Speaking of Samuro, you should probably try to play around that one if you can as well. Just think about what you're playing against, if it's likely that they have a Samuro in their deck, and if they do, how are they going to use it against you? Maybe if you can afford to not overextend into it, it's a good idea. But also, you want to make sure that the minion that they're most likely attacking into, is going to be able. You're going to have a follow up to be able to deal with it. Actually, the follow up doesn't matter as much, because then it's just a vanilla stated minion afterwards. But just having that in mind, where there's probably a large AOE potential, especially from like a priest opponent and stuff like that. Just watch out for Samuro Apotheosis and other effects like that, because that's definitely a way that you can get out of a game that you were very much so winning.
This is something where I made this mistake yesterday. I was playing Token Druid. I was against a Rush Warrior. And I said, okay, I have this board of 5 minions. If I Pride's Fury over Soul of the Forest, there's no way they can AoE and clear my board, right? They had a stage dive conditioning Samuro, and they cleared my board because I didn't play Soul of the Forest. So it's really Rush Warrior's only AoE, and there can just, if you're not aware of it, it's very easy to play into it, because you're like, no, this deck just attacks one thing at a time. He does not. He attacks multiple things at a time. Against Priest, what can you do about Samuro Apotheosis other than kill them before turn 7, or not have many minions in play? But against Warrior in particular, and sometimes against some of the mid-rangey Paladins as well that are going around, they can Conviction it or whatever. You can be aware that they're going to play an AoE and just play a little differently based on the volume of damage they can deal. And the Token Druid example of Pride's Fury versus Soul of the Forest is pretty specific, but it felt pretty relevant when I lost because I played the wrong one. Like, that specific play lost me the game.
Yeah. Honestly, Xyrella, I think it's pretty likely they're going to have the healing to clear no matter what. I think between Wand Makers for flash heals, or Renew, or Desperate Prayer. So Xyrella, you just gotta think of, can you handle the 4/4 on your way trying to get back on board?
Yeah.
And like hold, something back, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I included Xyrella. I don't think you can really play around her much unless they renew on turn 3 and they might have a Desperate Prayer and then they can blow you out. That's a possibility. But otherwise, you can't really do much other than play around it like any other AoE. But the single target / also AoE card that I think is the most important to play around in the format, Hysteria. Boy, this card is good. Remember how they nerfed it, by the way?
Yeah.
So how do we play around this card? What do you do? Because it seems really, really powerful.
A little bit of math. A little bit of holding things back. It usually, the good board into Hysteria tends to have, one very large minion and one mid-sized minion. Such that, if they Hysteria your largest thing, it will survive killing the rest of your board. And you'll be happy to still have with what's left. there's nothing really you can do about the Hysteria into Scorpid, right? Like, that's just gonna do it. But in most of the time, like, you want to keep it so that your biggest thing can survive killing the rest of your board.
Yeah, this is something that I've been
That's the
guilty
most
of.
common way to do it. The other way is to obviously have such a wide board of very, very similarly statted minions that it most likely just kills one of your other minions, and then you have a board remaining left over.
Right.
Yeah, this is something that I had to learn to stop doing, where like my Felma would wake up and I'd have a Mancrick play or whatever, and I would just run out of Kolkar Pack Runner and Hero Power, and now I just skip dropping the minion if I can. Being aware of, if they have Hysteria, developing less is good for me, because the removal spell doesn't work. I think it's more relevant against Warlock than Priest, because if you have I'll use Felma again, if you have a 5/4, all of their removal either deals 3 or is Hysteria or costs 1 million. So if you just make it so Hysteria can't kill your thing is going to live and it's going to hit him in the face. And they might Hysteria to kill the smaller thing, but they can't kill the bigger thing. So you kind of have to constantly be aware of that. And if you have a really large buffed minion, then you want to be aware and not playing too much stuff into it. If you have a Goody 2 shields, you basically can't play other minions. And you want Goody 2 shields to live. It's really good if it lives. There are a lot of ways for it to die in this format, like Bumper Car or whatever. But if you have a Goody 2 shields and a Righteous Protector, you have to skip hero powering, because otherwise Hysteria clears your board. That kind of thing is really counterintuitive. And I've made that mistake so many times this format, and then my board just goes away because of my own actions.
Yeah, also having high power, low toughness minions works pretty decently with it.
Yeah, though then you're still losing 2 large threats. It's just you're not losing a ton of threats. But I don't want to lose.
I mean, as long as you can, a lot of times, as long as you can maintain pressure, because they play the problem is, in the more later game scenarios, it's a little bit different. Like your early game scenarios, if you have, as long as you can maintain a bit of pressure, it's fine. But obviously, when you get into the later game, they can play it, and then whatever's left over, they can use some removal spells on. So having kind of an idea where you're at in the game and what's possible is also good to keep track of. Like, it might be worth convictioning earlier just to get more minions with high power, so that they might Hysteria. You get in a bit of damage, but they Hysteria kill 2 of your minions, but you still have a bit of pressure. You play another thing, and then you can kind of keep the game going that way.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned Conviction, Bodicus, because it's not only cards that you have to play around, but it's cards that you need to play at the right time. And Conviction is one where, instead of being more strategic, no, this is more literal of you need to play it at the correct point in your turn and not be dumb like someone on this podcast who might be me, who frequently plays minions and then casts Conviction. Can't do that.
I had a really interesting turn actually yesterday where I had a Crab Rider in play, and the what is it, Holy Knight? I don't think it's Holy Knight. The one that draws a holy spell.
Knight of Anointment.
Yeah, and I wanted to draw into a buff spell, so I played it first, hoping I'd draw it, but then I missed and played the Conviction afterwards, and I'm wondering if it was right or not.
Wait, you did what?
I played the Knight to try to draw +2/+2 buff spell, but I missed and ended up playing the Conviction after.
Did you hit?
No, I missed. I still won the game, but
Paladin.
Yeah, Paladin. I mean, I just drew a secret, and so it was like, all right, well,
yeah. I don't know. There are times when you need to develop the board because of some reason, and sometimes your Conviction's not going to hit, but this format has a good bit of sequencing stuff. I mean, there have been, also when I was trying out Shaman, there have been a few times where I attack with my Wind Fury minion twice and then swing with the Whack-a-Null Hammer, and I'm like, I'm dumb. But Conviction in particular, it's very easy to either lose track of how many mana crystals you have, of what rank the spell is at, and also to get caught up in the idea of developing your minions first and then attacking later. You just have to technically sequence that correctly and play it first. Now, Edelweiss, you've been playing some Rush Warrior.
Yeah, so other
Conditioning.
rank spell, Conditioning. Generally not something you want to play on 2, so don't keep it in the mulligan. It's most frequently played after turn 5, and you need a fair number of cards in hand. So you're usually looking to do things like get down Watley before your conditioning, right? Like if you can coin Watley so it draws you 3 minions, and then you play your conditioning, you're hitting more targets, that's ideal. You want to think about, what cards in my hand do I really want the buff on, right? So in terms of what are you going to play first, sometimes, Warmaul Challenger isn't as good in the matchup if you run it out on 3, but if you can get it hit with conditioning, it's a really insane removal tool. Oftentimes you will run out a bumper car or something early to corrupt a stage dive, for example. You want to make sure that you're playing your athletic studies and your stage dives before you play the conditioning, and maybe kill off your bumper car so that you can get those riders, and then have a bunch of 3/3s instead of 1/1s. That can often be pretty powerful. Not every list is running Playmaker anymore, but if you are running Playmaker, a way that you can end up with a bunch of stuff if you're finding yourself low on resources is you Playmaker, bumper car, fill your hand with riders, and then play your conditioning. And so all your riders are 3/3s.
Yeah, the sequencing there is important, and if you're able to conditioning and get a run back trigger, and you have a hand of 1-mana 4/4 rushers, the deck feels like Quest Rogue all of a sudden. That you have so much gas, and you can just kill anything, and you can survive through multiple removal sources, and just keep playing things. Yeah, it's a powerful card. I have been consistently surprised by how hand buff is relevant in Standard in 2021, but here we are. So, I've also been playing some Token Druid a little bit, and a card that I misunderstood the application of now that Savage Roar is gone is Arbor Up. Arbor Up is big Savage Roar now, but Solar Arbor is usually pretty bad with how this format has turned out. It just doesn't do enough. You really want to go wide with Gibberlings and Glowfly Swarms, and sometimes you do Thorn Growth Sentries and make 2/1/2 taunts, and then Adorable Infestation and play the 1/1s, and you Arbor Up to buff, but you rarely Arbor Up on an empty board. It's not enough of a threat with how this format is developing. There's too many ways to kill 4/3s, and just sticking 2 of them is really, really unlikely to happen. And I pretty much never Solar Arbor unless it's lethal. Pretty much never. And it's a different ball game than I remember it being, because we used to save up Nature Studies discounts just to Arbor Up on 4. You can't do that anymore and expect to win the game. The format has so much focus on controlling early boards that 2/4/3s even on turn 4 is not good enough.
Unless it's also buffing. Unless you already have minions in play. And
Yes.
then you probably do it.
Yes, that's correct. And there are a lot of cards that feel like they're good on curve, but aren't necessarily. Skull of Gul'dan. Skull on 6, now we know it's a powerful play. But if you have a skull and you've lost board and you can play other stuff, you should probably do the other stuff unless the skull is far right and you're going to miss your chance. A lot of the time it's better just develop and not fall behind because this format is so board-centric. That's been my experience so far, at least with the DHs I've tried.
Yeah, it's way better to catch up and use the skull to get ahead than it is to try to hope that the skull catches you up. Because most of the time you're probably going to be disappointed with, and especially if you're using the skull to catch up, then you're not using the real power level of the skull, which is the immense amount of power it brings to put you far ahead in the game with the amount of discounts you get, which by the way is 9.
9.
The one exception I would say is if you're OTK, sometimes you just skull for the card draw because you're going to gain your life back. But
oh yeah, it's not that you never do it. It's that there are some plays in Demon Hunter that feel almost routine and rehearsed at this point. Skull on 6 and Inquisitor on 8 if you have a weapon. And there have been games I've lost by doing those two things because I had better plays available and just chose not to make them because I went with the impulse. It's not just an impulse slam it. Don't just slam it. See what your options are.
Also, Inquisitor on 6. That's a play.
Yes, if you can Inquisitor on 6, you probably wish to do so. Most likely. And the last card I have written down here, Edelweiss, have you been Tenwooing? I feel like you would Tenwoo.
I have, yes. And, it's really good with Jandis. Or Kazakis.
Surprise. Also surprise.
Yeah, you don't have to Alex OTK. I have been playing Alex OTK a fair bit. But a lot of times you're really just going to try and make repetitive boards with either Kazakis or Jandis. And, Alex is the finisher. You can still set up 2 turns with Alex Shadow Step. But, Tenwu is just good early on. One of the great things to do, actually, is if you can Tenwu either Kazakis or Jandis Barov, and then Shadow Step the Tenwu, then you kind of have this choice of, well, you can do it on, something like that again later on, or you've got a 0 mana Tenwu to go with your Alex.
That seems good.
I like these. I like these thoughts. These thoughts make me happy.
Yeah. Tenwu's just in the meta right now with how Rogue looks right now, Tenwu is flexible and powerful. And that is in part due to how Rogue kind of has to cheat a little bit and has to you gotta find your answers with mana somehow, and you gotta play some broken legendaries because the class doesn't have a lot going on right now outside of those things. Surprisingly so. It's got really powerful legendaries and Wicked Stabs. And Tenwu does one of the things, and then Wicked Stab does the other things. Boy, Wicked Stab is quite the card. But otherwise, that entire mid game is kind of sketchy, and it's really filled in by legendaries right now. You've got sometimes you Hanar, and then you Mankrik, and then you Kazakis, and then you Golem, and then you Jandis, and you play all these legendaries on curve and hope it's enough.
Honestly, the format almost feels, at least to me, it feels a lot less powerful than other metas. I think we were talking about this a bit last week. It's definitely more powerful than when the game first came out, but it feels less powerful than some of the metas we've had recently. So a card like Tenwu probably sees more play, and a card like Hammer of the Naru, which saw basically no play until some nerfs came.
There are powerful turns, but it's not the entire game anymore. There are swing turns, but if you want to make a format about the board, you have to depower a lot of things. You have to turn down the power in burn, you have to turn down the power of combos. And there's still some of it. There's definitely still some, but this feels like a reimagining of what the classic format would be like if they made Vanilla Hearthstone now, knowing what they knew then, and they wanted more interactive mechanics. Then yeah, we got it. But you look at decks, yeah, they're filled with Wand Makers and Scorpids and, Mankrik High Rolls, which is just a spider tank with massive upside, but it's not the same when we were looking at decks with 30 class cards last expansion in Darkmoon Faire, where we're doing crazy things. It is definitely a different ball game, and I don't mind it, but it's really hard to shift from the mindset of what was powerful, and now the decks kind of all feel like they're missing a little something. And we really notice the cards that aren't there as opposed to the cards that are there. When I play Token Druid, I notice the lack of Savage Roar. And there's not really a ton of new cards in that deck where I'm like, wow, this new card's really amazing. It's just, I have to play differently because I don't have Savage Roar. And there are a bunch of decks like that where you really notice what you're missing. And the new cards are there, but are not the reason you're winning with the deck. And so it's going to take an adjustment. I imagine they'll buff some cards. I hope the mini set has some cool stuff. But yeah, the format definitely feels lower in power level than what we've had before.
And yet still, a bunch of things that are very prevalently played. Mankrik, Kazakis, Alex, Ysera is in Priest.
Alex is core, not Barons, but yeah.
Well, yes.
Still a new card, though.
Even so. I mean, core are new cards. Runthok seeing play. Talon is the most played legendary, I think.
I think so. Mankrik creeping up there.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm interested in enjoying it, but also I'm glad there's going to be changes soon, because I do think that I don't know if this format would hold my interest for another 5-6 weeks or longer.
Yeah, no way.
But I'm glad it's where it is now.
It makes a lot of sense that there's going to be a lot more tuning involved with this meta than previous ones, just because we lost so much. Instead of most of the time you just lose 3 sets and you start gaining more. We lost 3 sets plus 75% of classic and basic. It feels like it. Realistically, it's probably closer to 50%, because 50% of classic and basic were cards that were never ever saw play in the first place.
And yeah, I forget the exact numbers, but
it's a bunch.
We are playing with fewer cards than we ever have right now.
Well, the core set replaced most of them, right? Like it's I think we were mostly card neutral with core, but also 4 set metas have been, well, the last 4 set meta was Ashes of Outland, and that had different power level concerns than this one. It was not quite the same problems. And the one before that, Rise of Shadows, had some pretty major balance issues on launch, but all the classes that weren't Rogue and Warrior felt underpowered. Before that was Witchwood, and they had to nerf Kobold's cards. I think this is a pretty common 4-set problem, outside of Ashes, which, again, when you launch a new class, that has problems too.
Yeah, so there were 383 cards in Classic Basic. There are currently 235 in Core.
Oh, wow. 150 cards?
Yep.
That's okay. You were right. I was wrong. That is a lot less. That is fewer cards.
It is. The difference will be made up by the mini sets, 35 per expansion.
Oh, that's right.
And eventually, that will actually put us at more cards than we're used to because of the mini sets, because it's an extra 105 per year. But that won't really happen until we've had a full 2 years of a mini set for every expansion.
Interesting. Yeah, that's right, because we're only going to have 4 mini sets this standard, but we're going to end up with 6.
Right. And I think it's around it's around 4 or 5 that it goes over. I think it's around 5, maybe. I don't know. It gets close pretty quickly, but
I trust your math.
Don't trust my math.
Okay. So, anyways,
it's been a while and I'm fuzzy.
It's a lighter news week.
Wouldn't 5 be 175, right?
I'm also not going to do any math to check your math. It's too much. My head hurts.
It would. Yes, that's right.
So 4 is not quite enough because it's only
so 5 is the tipping point.
140.
5 and 6 is where it's more cards than core.
So it's a lighter news week. I want to talk about cards that we've been winning with and losing to, but I think we're going to start winding down here. We have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com. You can find our content info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can support us our show at patreon.com/Concede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats and our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com, or into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you like some CC swag, head over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Tenor Wizard, Doge, DK, Pro, Obi-Wan, Dr. Feesh, Crash Cap, Beef Squatch, David, P, Snowpack, and Taro, and Lucky. Thank you all. A lot of thanks. Also, our Twitch subs: Inarius, Electric Sheep City, Wicked Good for the Raid, Mad at Arms, Hungry Wizard, and Doge DK for the 7 subs. That's a lot. Edelweiss, you have a good Concede.
Yeah, I'm gonna be missing names, but really just Concede to Gia, Cora, Patra, Slissa, Nicolina, Sun Glitters, just everyone who's and Jocelyn, everyone who's been sharing their stories and really, um, you know, getting this stuff out there in terms of message, debating people on Twitter, which I have no patience for. I generally don't think that it's gonna ever lead to anyone learning anything, but Sun Glitters is out there uh, trying to show people the errors in their arguments, and I think I'm grateful to have them all out there, and you should all support them. Check out the media they've put out on these issues. And honestly, just the stuff that they put out in terms of content generally, they're all pretty awesome.
Yeah, good people, good messages, worth listening to. I'm sorry the discourse had to go the way it did this week, but I'm glad that they were there to share it. Bodikus, Concedes.
So I got an awesome message last night from a listener, Kick Punch, who got Legend for the first time yesterday, and it was just honestly an awesome message, thanking all the Coin Concede people, and yeah, I just wanted to Coin Concede because I remember the first time I hit Legend and how special it was to me, and yeah, it's just awesome to hear that we're helping people and that people appreciate the things that we do on the show, because we enjoy doing it and would do it anyway, but getting that feedback is really nice, and it was just awesome to get a message like that.
Yeah. Also, Coin Concede to Kick Punch. I've been, so he works overnights, and so we used to do coachings during his lunch break, which was 2 a.m. Local time, and I was awake 2 a.m. But then I started going back to work. I'm like, hey, maybe I should give this to Bodikus, who was 3 hours earlier. And so, but he hasn't needed any coaching. He got Legend all his own, so props to you, Kick Punch. Rational Pie.
Murloc Shaman in Wild.
It's so good in Wild. Oh, it's so good in Wild. You have no fin now, and you have every fin. You have both varieties of fins.
So many fins. All of the fins. Also, you have a new 1-drop that's probably really solid in that deck.
It's quite good. The new 2-drop, the 3/2 that shoots 2, the Mercspark Eel is really good. It's really, really strong.
Flurgle's probably also just insane.
Oh,
because
yes.
you have Toxfin.
I forget who was talking about this in chat, but someone said they cleared a Void Caller, the Void Lord, and the 1/3s in one turn with Toxfin Flurgle, which seems pretty filthy. Yeah. So, good job, Kick Punch. Also, Coin Concede to Rational Pie, who is the patron of all 3 of my Hearthstone podcasts. You crazy person. Thank you for that. Coin Concede to Wicked Good recorded an episode over on Off Curve on Tuesday. Our usual meta review. He was also very patient when 2 hours in my computer decided to do bad things. Knock on wood, that's not happening again. Coin Concede the Angry Chicken for letting me stay on. And Coin Concede to both Pfizer and my wife. Pfizer for yesterday getting in my arm, and my wife today for coming home early from work to take care of me. Because this morning I was really not feeling it. I'm better now. It was really just this morning where I was struggling, but it was unpleasant, and she came home and made me soup. It was nice. Yeah. So yeah. And that's gonna do it for our show this week. So, keep calm, and watch out for Galloping Savior. And if you see us on ladder, Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm going to bring the stream down now, and we'll see you soon.